This is a presentation on Christian existentialism as a philosophy and mode of behavior. This is an adapted presentation from the final paper I wrote for a history of psychology. So, according to Rollo May, existentialism is not a comprehensive philosophy or way of life, but an endeavor to grasp reality. In many ways, existentialism is the unique and specific portrayal of the psychological predicament of contemporary man. So this goes on to say that existentialism is about conflicts that are resolved within the individual as it relates to existence and living. Existentialism raises the questions, what is life? Why is life difficult? And what is my place in the universe? There is a secular answer to this question, and that is that existence is arbitrary, random, and there's plenty of suffering to go around. With that in mind, it may seem that life is not worth living in the midst of these questions that are raised by philosophers like Nietzsche, Camus, and Sartre. And if there's no point at all, then according to Camus, the highest philosophical question one can ask is whether or not to kill themselves. The Christians try to put their hat in the ring and claim that God as an all-powerful, benevolent deity is present and is real, which is actually problematic to this question. So these three authors that we'll be looking at comprise a selection of Christian existentialists. So we have St. Augustine of Hippo, we have Soren Kierkegaard, and Paul Tillich. These three authors will look at the ideas of existentialism as it relates to the Christian God and what it means for the individual. So St. Augustine wrote famously the Confessions, in which he said, "Nothing is nearer to your ears than a confessing heart and a life grounded in faith." In the Confessions, he lays out his heart before God and wrestles rather fiercely with his personal sins and with pride. He focused on God as the source of goodness in order to compare the two of existence as suffering and meaningless and God as a source of goodness. You stir man to take pleasure in praising you because you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it knows you. To Augustine, God is deliberate and caring. You omnipotent good. You care for every one of us as if you cared only for that person, and so for all as if they were but one. This is a God that doesn't work through thrownness, as the existentialists would call it, thrownness being the seemingly arbitrary and random nature of the universe, but a deliberate and caring God is one that works through all things for the good of his children. He also claimed to know God through meditation. You are more inward to me than the most inward part of me, and higher than my highest reach. God is a personal being for St. Augustine. And so in order to know this God, it needs to be self-reflection. The second author is Soren Kierkegaard, who saw it as his life's work to create difficulties everywhere. He came upon this realization when thinking about how Christians view life very simply, and they take everything on rote and routine. And rather than seeing the complexities of what is, they just take things for granted. And so Kierkegaard sought to stir up the waters a bit and mix things up in order so that truths could be revealed through the subjective and the objective working together. Kierkegaard famously said that truth is subjectivity. This allows absolute truth to still exist, preventing the sudden fall into relativism, and the subjective nature of the individual has validity and justifies their own experience. An overemphasis on objectivity would produce the reflexive and overly rational Christians that Kierkegaard was concerned about, that were devoid of the emotional impact of a true relationship with the divine. An overemphasis on subjectivity would be overbearing on the individual and lead to a relativistic society, as they are responsible for creating their own meaning without a standard to go on. So this relationship with God is the highest in existence, according to Kierkegaard, who laid out three stages of religious development. The first is the aesthetic stage, in which people are purely based on pleasure and what is satisfying and immediate. And then move to the ethical, where they have a sense of morality, and finally a religious, where they have a personal relationship with God. This is the highest level of being, according to Kierkegaard. There are many paradoxes, as we saw. One of the greatest being that life is unfair and that there are a lot of arbitrary and seemingly harmful things going on, but there's also a God that is in control of everything. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard outlines another one of these paradoxes, that God would demand the sacrifice of children, who is also himself a benevolent and good deity. And Abraham in the story resolves this paradox through faith. Through acting in faith towards God, the paradox is resolved. So all these paradoxes that include the moral goodness of God and the fallen, sinful nature of this world are resolved in the individual through faith. Finally, Paul Tillich. Paul looked at both essence and existence as two halves that are nested within one another in the individual. The essence of man, Tillich said, is freedom. Man expresses his freedom by elevating being to meaning. Man is free from being insofar as he believes in meaning. For Tillich, this freedom also causes angst. The infinite possibility that comes with freedom produces angst. Fear, horror, anxiety, the angst of not actualizing all the possibilities, and the angst of leaping from possibility into actuality. Man is afraid not to use this freedom, and yet he is afraid to use it. So for Tillich, with this essence comes a lot of responsibility. This essence of freedom demands a lot, and that can cause fear and doubt. On the other side, with the greatness of freedom also comes existence, which is tragic and sinful. We're bound to these two parts of servitude, tragic and sinful. For these three authors, they concluded that the greater joy everywhere is preceded by the greater pain. That which is now is temporary, and focusing on a personal relationship with God is what allows the individual to transcend it. For the Christian existentialist, to struggle with God is that greater pain that leads to greater joy. Augustine confessed, Kierkegaard developed a personal relationship, and Tillich explored the nature of human freedom, all in the name of justifying an existence that wrestles ceaselessly with God.